we want to ask you about the big debate right now over Article 59 of the Rome Statute. We're hearing all sides of the debate. Eh. But before we go to that, sir, I understand just today, nag-file naman ng the fourth petition with the Supreme Court, this time by Paulo Duterte, questioning yung pagkakaresto and I understand insisting that the former president be brought back home because illegal daw yung pagkakaresto and shortcuts that were taken. Is that still possible? He's no longer in Philippine jurisdiction. Can anybody, even the Supreme Court, the Philippine Supreme Court, can we reach over and pull him back in? Is there anything to look at there?
Legally po, that's no longer possible considering that the subject is no longer within Philippine jurisdiction. The jurisdiction of our Supreme Court is only limited within the Philippine jurisdiction or Philippine territory. So outside po, all its orders, rulings, or even judgments, wala na pong binding effect yun outside the Philippine jurisdiction.
Mm-hmm. But can any Philippine court, whether it's the Supreme Court or the CA or one of the RTCs, can they sanction or find fault and then sanction government agencies for any violation of law in terms of the way that the sending off of the former president is concerned? For example, if there were any shortcuts taken, if there were any abuse of authority, and so on down the line. Meron bang ganon? Iba pa, siyempre, iba pa ho yung kung pwedeng ibalik. Pero yung pwede bang patawan ng parusa kung meron bang pagkakamali? Iba pa ho sigurong usapin yun.
Yes po, may mga batas naman po tayo with respect to the conduct of arrest and of course yung mga respect for our constitutional rights. But of course po, that's a separate inquiry and that will also involve individual liability, either administrative or criminal, of the persons responsible. Pero that will have no effect at all on the validity of the warrant or the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court.
Okay.
Dean Ralph,
Pero Professor,
go ahead, Amy.
Professor, pwedeng utusan ng Supreme Court kasi tinurn over si President Duterte with the consent of the Philippine government. Pwedeng sabihan ng Supreme Court ang Philippine government, bawiin niyo yung order niyo at pauwiin niyo yung tinurn over niyo sa Interpol. Pwede ba yon?
Kahit na po gawin ng Supreme Court po yun, and even if the Philippine government will issue such a request or an order, it no longer has legal standing with to make such a request, considering that number one, it's no longer a party to the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, and number two, the court has already acquired jurisdiction over the person of the accused, the former President Duterte in this particular case.
So, Dean, parang sarado na yung tindahan.
You can say that, of course, yeah.
Dean Ralph,
So kung sakasakaling gusto ng gobyerno to reacquire jurisdiction over former President Duterte, kailangan mag-file ng manifestation sa ICC. Ganun ba yon?
Pwede po, pero I don't think it will still be entertained because after the court acquires jurisdiction, the normal criminal proceeding will now be triggered. So it will begin with the confirmation of charges before the pretrial chamber, and then eventually, if the charges will be confirmed by the pretrial chamber, then it will go into a full-blown hearing or trial before the trial chamber of the International Criminal Court.
actually, Dean Ralph, that's why we invited you, because you wrote an FAQ that went viral on social media on what's going to happen from here on out. So I wonder if you could help us piece together your next steps here. So you already mentioned confirmation of charges hearing. Usually, how long does that take? Do we have any indication at this point mga kailan kaya mangyayari yun? We know it's in front of the same pre-trial chamber, but give us a sense of what you know about how it might take place, yung confirmation of charges hearing.
Depende po yun sa availability ng mga technically wala pa pong witnesses yun. The witnesses will be presented in the before the trial division or trial chamber. Sa confirmation of charges po, it will just be the office of the prosecutor. He will be presenting the charges, presenting the evidence. It's for the purpose of parang showing to the court or establishing to the court that there is sufficient evidence to hold the accused for trial, and that they have sufficient evidence in their possession or in their possession to establish the guilt of the person.
Is that the part where he enters an appeal, a plea?
A plea.
Opo, that's part po.
Okay, that's where he says, okay, guilty, not guilty.
Parang arraignment.
Oo.
Opo.
Yeah, okay. So confirmation of charges hearing, let's assume that he's going to plead not guilty at this point because we already know that the defense is getting ready to challenge the jurisdiction. What happens from there?
Yung challenges to the jurisdiction po, including yung mga questions about admissibility and the compliance with the principle of complementarity, all those issues can also be raised before the pretrial chamber. And then, so the pretrial chamber usually will also come up with a separate decision on those particular issues.
Dean, if I can, sir, I'd like to back up a bit kasi si Yusek Claire Castro, the Palace Press Officer, earlier said that before the former president is brought to the ICC pretrial chamber, he will have to be brought before a Dutch court, specifically a Dutch court, to determine whether or not the requisites were met for his transfer from Philippine jurisdiction to the Netherlands. I'm assuming that it's a separate chamber or court altogether and not a part of the ICC. Kasi parang yun ang specific na binigit ni Attorney Castro, ni Yusek Castro. I'm wondering if that's part of the process or if this is something else that has to do with yun nga. Since we are not anymore party to the Rome Statute, is Dutch court now taking over the position of the custodial state?
Well, I cannot really, say something about that because under the Rome Statute and under the rules of procedure of the International Criminal Court, there is no mention of such thing.
Yes, sir.
And usually, what happens is that as soon as the accused is, turned over to the jurisdiction of the court, there are already processes, and all those processes will be taking place before the International Criminal Court.
Actually, while you were talking, Ed, we just got breaking news. We had a statement from Philippine Ambassador to the Netherlands,
Okay.
Eduardo Malaya, who confirmed to Philippine News Agency that Duterte will not be brought to any local Dutch
okay.
court. Will not. So he says it will be proceedings before ICC all the way. There is no requirement for an arrested person to be brought before a Dutch local court under the Rome Statute. That is according to
that's clear.
Philippine Ambassador to the Netherlands, Eduardo Malaya. So it was Yusek Castro who was wrong in this instance.
Okay,
Oh.
at least that's clear. Sir, sorry sir, pero Filipinos, this is a first for Filipinos, and this is also a first for a Filipino sa ICC. Ang reference lang natin yung korte natin sa Pilipinas which is usually slow. Well, it's being kind here. But
Usually
slow.
shared naman, ang bait-bait mo talaga.
And maraming delay, di ba? Mag-schedule ng vista next week or next month, tapos mapopostpone pa yan and so on down the line. How soon do you think we will see the former president in court, whether for confirmation of identity or confirmation of the cases or confirmation of whether he understands the cases and so on down the line? Kumbaga, how soon do you think we will see the former president in court?
I think it will happen in the next couple of weeks or couple of months, but it will happen soon. Kasi po, he also has a right to speedy trial.
Yes, sir.
And if there is an undue delay, that is not the fault of the accused in the course of the proceeding. That will also give the accused, in this case, former President Duterte, the right to, to request for interim release pending trial. So normally, the office of the prosecutor will also try to ensure that the proceeding there will be no undue delay in the proceedings.
Sir, couple of weeks or couple
Professor
of months?
Ano?
Ganun katagal, sir, before we see the former president in court? A couple of weeks to a couple of months? I mean, not next week, not Monday or Tuesday or anything like that. That's not probable.
It will all depend on the schedule of the court because you must also understand that there are also other pending
Yes, sir.
proceedings for the International Criminal Court. So the parties will meet and they will come together to agree on the scheduling and everything.
And get legal counsel accredited, for example, by the ICC. Mm-hmm.
Apo.
Professor, linawin ko lang kasi parang ang sinasabi ngayon ng mga tao, if kung ano man yung challenges ng Duterte camp sa jurisdiction ng ICC, doon na lang sila mag-argue imbes na sa Pilipinas. Yun ba yun? Tama ba yun? Na wala nang magagawa rito eh.
Opo, yung mga issues regarding jurisdiction, at this point in time po, it is now the International Criminal Court that has jurisdiction over
Yes.
things. So you can raise the issue on admissibility, yung issue on complementarity, jurisdiction. And normally, prior to the actual trial proceedings, normally they usually issue a separate decision on questions of jurisdiction.
Was
Admissibility of jurisdiction in particular.
Tapos dagdagan ko lang yung tanong ni Ed. Alam naman natin kung ano yung mga testimonies against him, yung mga witnesses. Sa tingin nyo, gaano katagal kaya aabutin yung formal trial? Considering all the challenges, all the circumstances, saka nagkaroon na naman ng mga previous cases eh. Sa tingin nyo, kayo, estimate nyo?
Based on history of the International Criminal Court, fastest was around 2 or 3 years. But normally, they take around cases take around 8 or 8 years or even beyond 8 years.
Okay.
we were
Years.
talking about that yesterday. So it means
Yeah.
na he will be detained there that whole time. There is no option for bail. Dean Ralph, in your opinion, was the principle of complementarity sufficiently met in this case? Because yung complementarity principle, of course, says ICC should only step in when the national courts are unable or unwilling to prosecute the crimes in question. Was it sufficiently met?
Ang isa pong important word doon is genuinely prosecute. So it's a two-pronged statement po. It's either unwilling or unable. And if we put it in context, at the time prior to the withdrawal of the Philippines, and even after the withdrawal of the Philippines from the Rome Statute, when former President Duterte was still the president, he has uttered statements expressing the unwillingness of the Philippines to recognize the jurisdiction of the court with respect to these particular cases. And then when President Bongbong Marcos assumed office, the initial position or stand of the present administration was also not to recognize the jurisdiction of the court. And so that will show an unwillingness. And also, if you will check the 2023 decision of the Appeals Chamber with respect to the question on admissibility, pursuant to the request of the Philippine government for deferral, which was filed sometime in 2021, the Appeals Chamber po found that considering that no actual cases were filed against important personalities or crucial personalities on the war on drugs. And despite the fact that we have a law, we have the IHL law in place where people in relation to allegations of violations of crimes against humanity, no actual cases were filed.
Yeah.
And so it's the reason why the International Criminal Court dismiss the challenges based on the question or based on the principle of complementarity and admissibility.
The 2023 case you're talking about is when the appeals chamber composed of 5 judges. What we heard about that was that the vote was split. 3 judges voted yes, there is jurisdiction over this case, and 2 judges voted no. So is that something that Duterte's side can then exploit, given that they're going to challenge the jurisdiction in this case, right? The fact that the judges themselves seem to be split, at least yung appeals chamber.
Opo, this is a contentious issue, no? So we need to watch and see what will happen in the future. Of course, the judges will be different, and this challenge, because previously yung challenge on admissibility and invoking the principle of complementarity was raised not by the accused former President Duterte, but it was raised by the Philippine government itself. And so the accused former President Duterte can now himself raise the question of admissibility and the question of respect to the principle of complementarity. So there's a possibility that depending on the composition of the court and depending on because there can be changes in opinion depending on the movement of thought with respect to international law. There's a possibility actually of a change in the ruling.
Sir, let me ask you about ano, sir. Yung interim release of the accused. Well, I was reading Article 59 where it is mentioned. Ang hindi lang klaro sa akin if this refers to interim release of the accused before he is surrendered to the ICC or even while his case is being debated in the pre-trial phase. So, in other words, is bail in whatever form that you call it, is that going to still be, accessible? Is that it is still going to be accessible to former President Duterte at this point?
First, I must clarify that the interim release based on Article 59, which you mentioned, that actually applies at the arresting
Yes,
at
sir.
the arrest
Arresting.
stage, and that can that can happen before the subject is turned over to the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court. So there is a possibility of requesting for interim release at the pendency of those particular proceedings. Now, but even during the proceedings before the International Criminal Court, the accused can actually also request for interim release pending the proceedings.
Okay. Pero sir, it says under urgent and exceptional circumstances. Would we know if this has ever been tested and tried and successfly applied for by any of the accused in previous cases before the ICC?
I haven't checked specifically with respect to this matter, but under the rules of the International Criminal Court, it is allowed, and there are several grounds wherein it can be used by the accused. Even for medical reasons, it can be used in cases of, for example, undue delay in the proceedings, which is caused by the accused. It may also be a ground to request for interim release pending proceedings.
Pero sir, for example, medical issues or even the issue of age, kasi of course you're looking at the president who's already
turning
going
80 this month.
But then again, ICC is trying people who are of senior age because you're looking at leaders
Much older.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, technically, age po is not a defense, and usually yung facility po sa The Hague are very good facilities. And normally, wala namang problem. For medical reasons, they can immediately provide for medical, any medical procedure. If ever that it will be required that medical, let's say certain medical treatment or medical procedure will be required outside of the facility, usually it will be under the supervision of the court. So normally, this will be discretionary on the court and subject to the sound discretion of the court.
So, attorney, even if theoretically, pwede ang...
Pakilala mo po namin, attorney. That's Ronald Llamas, our resident political pundit, who is, I think, on the road right now.
Yeah, sorry. No? Attorney, even if theoretically allowed ang bail, ay malaki ang possibility na i-deny siya dahil sa possibility ng flight risk siya. Especially with the support of China na binanatan yung ICC when he was arrested. No? So, di ba malaki ang probability na hindi siya, kahit mag-request siya ng bail within the rules ng ICC, ay malaki rin ang possibility na hindi i-grant sa kanya yon.
First po, I must clarify that there is no right to bail before the International Court.
Okay.
Iba po yung tawag natin doon, that's interim release pending proceedings. Kasi po when you say right to bail under domestic law, it is a constitutional right. So as long as the defense is bailable, so it becomes your right as long as you can post a cash bond, property bond, or surety bond, then it is your right to secure your provisional liberty. But in the International Criminal Court po, there is no such right. So it will be subject to the evaluation of the court. You may request for interim release pending proceedings. But as you have mentioned, yung risk of flight po, that's one big factor that is usually considered by the International Criminal Court in determining whether or not to grant a request for interim release pending proceedings.
So interim release ang tawag.
Opo.
But again, as you point out, it's not a right to bail in this instance.
Opo,
There's not a
it is
right
not
to
a-
bail in this instance. Okay, we will have to leave that there for now. Thank you so much for your time and your insights.
Thank you, sir.
LaSalle Bacolod College
po.
of Law Dean Ralph Sarmiento. Thanks for joining Storycon.
Tama, Dean.
Thank you,
po.
Dean.
Thank you po.